Let's scout the 26 commit Jarin Mock, the quarterback. We got Brian Smith coming on. We're going to talk about his game, strengths, weaknesses, what Badger fans are potentially getting with that 2026 quarterback.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Ryan Harings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. For all the everydayers, we appreciate you. Thank you for jumping in, helping us build this community. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. All right, we're going to bring Brian Smith on, Locked On's recruiting insider, recruiting expert for the Locked On Podcast Network. Brian, man, last time you were on, or a couple shows ago, we talked about Jarin Mock a little bit. He visited, had an offer. He's committed. I want to dive a little bit more into the game now that he has committed. The Badgers have their 2026 quarterback. Thoughts on the early commitment for the Badgers, their first kid in the 26 class?
A few points that are very positive for the Badgers. Number one, it's always good to get a kid out of the Columbus, Ohio area. It's got a lot of talent. Obviously, it's next to Wisconsin's big rival from the eastern part of the Big Ten. I think that it's a good player, and getting a quarterback early, again, out of Ohio, is going to attract some attention. It's the first commitment. So now the question is, can he get some of the receivers to come with it? Until we see it, you don't know, but I didn't expect them to get their first commitment being a quarterback either. So, like we're going to talk about one of the kids they're recruiting from Illinois that's a receiver, et cetera, a little later in the show. This is how you do it. There has been a humongous run on quarterbacks in the 26 class, not 25, in the 26 class already. So it's interesting because a bunch of schools are done, and Wisconsin is too. So they're ahead of the curve. But as a passer, he's very comfortable in the pocket. He'd rather stay in the pocket, but when he does get flushed, he can go. I'm curious if that's the way he's been coached, because they don't seem to run a lot of RPO and stuff. It's more traditional spread pro passing attack, but I think he can adapt to whatever. And it's not all that much different than what Longo has run during his career up into and now at Wisconsin. So I think he'll be a good fit.
You mentioned there's been a run on 26 quarterbacks, because I had a couple of people reach out after this commitment. They said, man, why go so early? This isn't early for quarterbacks.
Not anymore. Let me just throw out some schools for you. Okay, you don't have to worry about the names, but all the following schools are done. Florida State, Florida, Notre Dame, Michigan. When those kind of schools, Penn State, have gobbled up top-end guys, if you don't get busy on that, it can end badly. So how many kids are going to be left? And like Ohio State is hard to beat. I don't know if they'll go after him later. It's hard to say depending on how his junior year goes. But, you have to be looking at it from a negative perspective. Like, if we don't get somebody, we're going to get left holding the bag. And we all know when you miss a quarterback, it's over. So you got to get a good one every year. And they're going to transfer. It's just take as many as you can. Who's left over, it is what it is. I think it's the only way to do it. Once a couple of the top guys committed, there was a 3-week stretch where somebody committed every few days. You have to do it. And now, no kidding, they will be scouting 27 quarterbacks immediately. You can like that, dislike that. That's just the way this works. You only take one a year. So if a couple go without you offering them, you're behind the 8 ball with a smaller pool. It's just numbers.
Let me ask you this. So I think it's fair to say, just at least from a recruiting standpoint, and how these players will develop. These are young quarterbacks, right? These sophomore film we're going off of. So how they develop over the next couple of years and what they become in college, we don't know fully. But from a recruiting standpoint, it feels like the top tier was gone, and Jarin Mock is kind of in that second tier from a recruiting standpoint. What do you think he's missing that maybe he doesn't have some of those other offers?
I was asking myself that when I was watching his film again. This is being picky, but his throwing motion is pretty natural in general, but it's not the fastest release all the time. And I think a lot of people want to see him run more, which is obviously his high school doesn't want him to, or he would. If you're not an RPO guy in today's world, you better have a howitzer for an arm. He's got a good arm, but he doesn't have a cannon for the schools like Ohio State, Texas to offer. So I don't think he's a lot different than like Diabell. He's another kid that's committed. He's from Florida, but he's committed to Texas. that's just an example. Like Diaz a little more advanced. He can run some too, but I think this kid's more mobile. He's just played at a better high school in South Florida, plays at American Heritage, one of the best programs in the country. Just little things with the technique and stuff. But if he fixes that, I'm telling you, Wisconsin's going to have some competition, which, by the way, is good. Because if he's not getting better, then you're not getting a player. It's going to help you beat Michigan, et cetera, anyway. So I expect to see some schools still come after him because, again, he's got a natural motion. Just needs to speed it up. He'll probably run a little bit more down the line.
What I find impressive, and I agree with you watching his film, he wants to stay in the pocket. He scrambles, keeps his head up, eyes downfield, extends plays, take hits, delivering the ball. It's hard. I feel like it's harder to find that and try to push him to run more than to find the quarterback that runs all the time, tucks, and be like, hey, play quarterback.
Yeah, it's usually worse. Jordan Travis is the one exception here recently. He stunk when he was first at Florida State. He wasn't coached that well. Went to Louisville for a year, went to Florida State. First year or so he was there. If he had a couple bad plays in the first half, he just ran all the time. Norvell and his staff did a good job with him. But if you really look at it, there haven't been too many other guys recently that have done it. Now, a certain guy that's playing for the Ravens might argue with that because he's just such an athlete. It doesn't matter what he does. But really, guys that want to run, that's typically who they are. And you've got to beat it out of them to a certain degree. But if, like you said, if you're not looking downfield when there's a rush, you have to be willing to know you're going to get drilled sometimes, and it just is what it is. Most guys don't like that much. I don't blame them. But that's one of the things that quarterback coaches get mad about. Protect the ball with two hands, look down the field, you get hit. You got to escape after a certain time. You got the clock in your head and all that. But it's about making plays down the field. Everybody talks about it. There's not a coach that doesn't want one of those guys in some capacity. Even Kirby. I mean, they won 2 national titles with a guy that could run around. He was a former walk-on, by the way. Mm-hmm. So if you can't move, chances aren't very good you're going to be really good in this era.
Yeah, that's great stuff. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to go back with a defensive lineman that the Badgers have recently targeted. It's been crystal balled to Wisconsin. What does Brian Smith think of the Badgers reloading one of his favorite positions, or hopefully reloading one of his favorite positions? We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Game Time. Game Time remains your number one source for all your sports, ticketing information, whatever you need from a ticketing information, like ticketing inventory, if you want to go to new NASCAR events, theater, comedy. And obviously, if you want to get those tickets to Camp Randall, you want to get those tickets to the Kohl Center, you're going to do that over at Game Time. They have the biggest inventory, best prices, biggest selection, panoramic views of the seats before you sit down. So you know exactly how close you are to the nacho stand and the bathrooms. It's all over there. Again, flash deals, so you get great deals right at the end. So you don't have to plan months and months in advance and try to figure all this out. With Game Time, you can kind of go with the flow. Figure it out, get great deals, get great inventory, get great prices. Game Time is the place I go for all my tickets right now. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create the account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Today's show is also brought to you by our great new friends over at Factor Meals. This is a thing for me. I listen, I need this. I'm excited to get my first boxes in because I eat like a 18-year-old college freshman. Literally today I was eating a Lunchable. I don't think those are made for 41-year-olds. They're just not, even though they come with the Capri Sun, which is delicious. Factor Meals is there to help you eat better, kickstart your health journey. Healthy meals, a huge variety, breakfast through dessert, over 35 different meals with 60 add-ons. So you have all the variety you could possibly want. Support your body, get the right fuel in your body, and don't spend a ton of time in the kitchen trying to whip all those ingredients up. Factor Meals is there for you right now. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. That's factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. Use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first order. And then another 20% off your next month's order. So you're not going to go wrong. 50% off your first order, factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. All right, let's get Brian back on. Let's keep talking defensive line recruiting. Let's go. It's our favorite topics, right? Let's get receivers. Let's get defensive linemen. And the Badgers have been crystal balled a pretty interesting 2025 guy. Like the 25 class is mostly wrapped up. We're going to talk a lot of 26. But Xavier Ukponu, who I think I'm pronouncing that name relatively correctly, defensive lineman, 6'3", 300 pounds, coming out of Denton, Texas. 3-star composite kid, coming to visit Wisconsin for the Alabama game. I think they have a really good spot for him. What do you think of Xavier's game?
Power player, somebody that's trying to learn, if you will, how to play football at a high level. He's got the frame. I met him a couple years ago, but that's a kid that just screams Wisconsin development of old, but he's probably got a better frame than some of the kids they've worked with out of high school. Like, he's already got natural size. Just needs to kind of change his body a little bit, continue with the technique, but he can be an anchor in the middle. If you're going to play against Michigan, who's still going to run the ball, in teams like that, if you don't have guys like Xavier, your chances of beating them are not very good. So I also think that he's a guy that can learn to be a pass rusher and whatnot, because he's a good athlete, but again, just a little raw. But he had the offers like from major programs and Texases of the world and stuff like that. Some of them are still on him, some aren't, but like, this is the kind of kid Wisconsin never gets. You know, this is the one I yell at you about all the time.
Yeah, I take the brunt of that. I do. And you're right. Like, the interesting thing here, the offer list, and this is just whether or not they're in on them right now or not. These are the schools that have offered or were in on them at some point: LSU, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Oregon. There was a reported Florida State offer. Like, there's really good interest here. He's a mid 3-star composite, and I started thinking back to the transfer portal of last year and how hard it is to get defensive linemen. And this is not the sexiest player. This is not a guy who's going to get 8 sacks, but he can anchor the middle. That's super valuable if you can get that dude in your program.
Yeah, $500K will get you in the ball game for a D tackle. I didn't say land him. I said get you in the ball game. It's better to get the high school kid. So proven commodities at D tackle just aren't there. Wisconsin's not going to play that game. We know that. So you've got to be a recruit, red shirt, retain. Those are the 3 R's. It's not going to be easy because now they're starting to recruit a little better. This is a show we're going to do somewhere down the line. In December this year, next year, Brian, somebody just left. That means somebody just got bought over the phone because, you know, Wisconsin's got a good program. They got to start paying some of the guys that develop. But that's the way you win. Like juniors, seniors, 5th-year seniors in the middle, those 3-star guys, once they're coached up, it's the same thing. It's just the difference between a 3-star at 290 and a 5-star is development. Like the 5-star kid's just ready to play right away. So you got to get these guys every single year, and you got to keep them. And once they get to about their 3rd year, they can contribute. This is the perfect program builder for the Wisconsin Badgers.
And you watch film of him playing pretty high-level competition. I think he's the 5A level. And
yeah, that's a big-time program he's at, big-time program.
He just doesn't get moved. He disengages. He doesn't get moved. He makes tackles. Like, this honestly feels – and you mentioned Michigan. This, I've said it before a couple times, but some guys feel like Michigan-type defensive linemen that are just tough, nasty, physical as hell, and they don't give up in the middle of the line of scrimmage. You need a couple guys like that.
I think you need one of those guys every year. I mean, it's just imperative because guys get banged up. Guys, like if he just blows up and he turns pro after his junior year, if you didn't get one like him in the class after, that's 2 years, and then you're in trouble. So, like, the reason LSU has guys turn pro all the time in the D-line because they get one of those guys every year. You know, they just had 2 guys leave early. They're a little bit of a trouble spot this year, but that won't last long. So you have to recruit these guys every year. Great start, though. This is the best D-line class. If they get him, they've had since when? Ever? You know, like
probably go back to Barry Alvarez days, right? He landed some pretty elite guys, but that's mid to early 90s. So, yeah, it's been a minute.
I just don't think you're going to elevate your program with some of these guys. You got to make it 2nd and 8, and you got to, you know, take up blockers for your linebackers to make plays. This is not rocket science. It's about recruiting. Defense especially is about recruiting. And, you know, the guys that you signed that are over 270, 280, that can move like this, I could probably count them on one hand in the last 10 years at Wisconsin. They don't get guys like this on the D-line very often. They need to finalize and get this kid committed.
Let me ask you this. I meant to ask you this on a previous show when it came out. What were your thoughts? And I'm shifting gears here kind of quickly, and I didn't prepare you for this, but I know you have some thoughts on this. What are your thoughts on the NCAA raising the scholarship limits?
I just did a pod about that today on my Locked On Seminole show. It's very perplexing. There's a whole bunch of things, but the meat and bones of it, the NCAA is trying to cover its backside on back pay and all this stuff. 22% of the money that's going to start next year from the House rule or whatever. Some of those walk-ons are going to get it, but how many are you going to keep? With the portal being available and immediate eligibility, if you think, oh, we're just going to take 20 more scholarship players. No, you're not. These kids are just going to leave anyway. It's a super fine line. Now, Wisconsin might be able to keep a few more kids, like a Chicago 3-star kid or something. You could go to maybe 90, but after that, you're just going to start losing kids. It's hard to keep kids now. So depends on your perspective. But from what I've heard, and I made a few calls on this, most people think it'll still predominantly be the walk-on guys, because you want people that'll show up to practice knowing that, they might play in garbage time against Central Michigan, but they're not going to play against Michigan. Wisconsin, they're just not. And they're going to give a good scout look. So the 20 scholarships in addition, it's just they're going to be in the fold, but you can't go over 105 now, which is a big deal. A lot of programs are $120. That's a lot of guys you're not going to have. So it's going to be a rolling deal. Like if you lose 2 or 3 guys you didn't expect, portal early to the NFL, whatever, you might see a school take a few more flyers on a JUCO kid or something because they got extra scholarships. But I really don't think many schools will go over 90 with the traditional scholarships.
That's a really interesting point that I don't think I fully thought about because you're correct. For every player you take, that's more resources you have to invest, more NIL money you have to invest, and such a diminishing level of return at that spot on the roster, right? The 91st guy, the 92nd guy, the 93rd guy. That's a really interesting point. Do you think there's a school that is there a school that comes to mind right away that said, when this came about and you thought about it, that you said that might be a school to somehow take advantage of this?
Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin does things a little different. I don't think it'll be so much from the high school ranks, but I think like Mississippi's full of good junior colleges, maybe 1 or 2 more there. And then they spend a lot of money with their collective. They might hit a couple extra kids from the portal that they may not have otherwise. And he doesn't care if guys drop out or what, it's Lane's a little different. I would imagine that they'll be one of the wilder ones with it. After that, I really don't know. You might see Michigan State do that short term because they're short on scholarships. Like this class and next, I mean, they're just in a bad spot. That's a long – Jonathan Smith's got a really long haul. You might see something a little different there, but most of the programs in the top 20, they're not going to change much. They know who their players are, and again, you're going to just run guys off by signing an extra 10 players a year. It doesn't work. So I'd imagine most guys won't go over 90 scholarships. I don't know. What do you think, Wisconsin? Do you think they'll do it at all? I don't know how big. I don't know him. I don't know his mentality well enough to say, to be honest.
That's really interesting. So Wisconsin has one of the better walk-on traditions in the country, right? The litany of players that have walked on and become NFL guys. It's incredible. So I could just see them taking and every year they had 5 or 6 walk-on guys that have MAC level offers, North Dakota offers, that kind of stuff. They add them into the program. I feel like those guys are just going to eat into that extra 20 scholarships, right? So instead of walk-ons, you're going to have an extra 5 scholarship guys a year that would have been walk-ons. I think that's how they'll probably work it. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, quite frankly. I don't. It probably really doesn't move the needle now that we talk about it too much either way.
Well, again, there's a lot of ways to look at it. And it's an insurance clause, if nothing else. Again, if you lose a couple guys early in the draft or injuries or something, you've got a little more room, especially with the portal. So we'll see how it goes.
I wonder, and that's the other thing I was going to ask really quick. I wonder if that makes teams even a little more aggressive in the portal. Like if you can just –
well, you got more room, potentially. You got to be careful about the walk-on room and stuff. You don't want to cause any problems. But even if it's just 2 more players, if you lost 2 DBs to graduation and 1 just got hurt, being down 3 DBs in this era is a problem. Like you might take an extra guy in the portal to see how it goes in spring. You know what I mean? Like we're not going to go in to the season short. If you're short a DB in this era, you're going to get killed. Mm-hmm. So especially at the end of the season when guys are tired, that doesn't work. So you might be looking at it for more of an insurance clause year to year as a coaching staff. So it's going to be fascinating.
That's good stuff from Brian. We're going to take one more quick break, friends of the show. Come back. We'll talk about a couple key 2026 prospects, hit on them kind of quickly, but players Wisconsin has been on, offered, and have been to campus. We'll do that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show, great friends of the show over at eBay Motors. eBay Motors, listen, I've talked about it. That's your number one source for all your car part needs. Like, don't waste the time going to the store, put it on the shirt. And honestly, if you need car parts, you might not be able to get to the store anyway. The old jalopy might not get there, right? So go to eBay Motors, Buy what you need, get it delivered, fix it yourself. If you can't do it, get the neighbor down the road, get some beer, make some cookies, let him come over, turn the wrench, fix it together, build camaraderie, and get your car fixed right away. The best prices, the best inventory, the best site to keep your ride or die alive. That's over at eBay Motors. The right parts, the right fit, the right prices. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers, but they have over 122 million parts for anything you need on your car. Keep your ride or die alive over at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. That's over at ebaymotors.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by our good friends over at LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the number one spot for all your hiring needs. Well, this is the Brian Smith Recruiting Show. LinkedIn is all about recruiting. That's why we talk about LinkedIn when we have them on here. It's all about talent acquisition, and every hire is incredibly important for your small business. That's why you have to use LinkedIn. You'll have the best candidates, screening tools to get rid of people that have no business interviewing for your job. That's what LinkedIn does. They keep out the riffraff and just let the good candidates come in. So you are saving time. What is saving time? Saving time is saving money. That's what LinkedIn is here to do as a hiring manager. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply over at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. LinkedIn.com helps find the right candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Now let's get Brian back on here. Let's talk about some 2026 guys that we want to highlight that have been on campus that the Badgers are in on. The first one I want to talk about is Zachary Washington. So athlete, 6'2", long, rangy athlete, fast, coming out of Illinois, about 13 offers right now, including Miami, a few other schools. What were your thoughts on Zachary Washington?
He's a kid right now that's not the strongest young man, but he can really run. He's a kid that I've seen. I'd imagine if he can get 15, 20 pounds on between now and the time he graduates high school, shouldn't be that hard, that he'll be a 25 offer kid and maybe more. He can really run. He's a Chicago kid. He's been around the recruiting scene. Now it's just about refinement with his game, learning the route tree, being more consistent in and out of his breaks. But I think I've mentioned a couple 100 times on this show how they need more speed outside at Wisconsin. But this is the kind of kid where they're not going to go get Jeremiah Smith necessarily, but you can go get kids like this, redshirt them, second-year player, like they can be guys, especially in a spread. This is the kind of kid that like North Carolina State's made a living off of forever. You know what I mean? Like they always have a speed receiver or whatever. You got to have somebody like this. I think that you should recruit him hard if you're Wisconsin, a Chicago kid anyway. That's basically the home city for the Badgers. There's no reason they shouldn't recruit him hard. I'm sure he'll have plenty of other offers coming up soon after he comes out. Like when these juniors put their first 3 games on Huddle, the app that allows you to download your film quickly, it won't take long. He can really, really run. So, yeah, you'll see more offers of this kid.
What's that level of competition like that he's playing against? I mean, Chicago, what does that mean for you when you talk about Southern Texas ball, Southern ball, California ball? Where does Chicago fit into that?
Chicago is more of a basketball city, has been for a long time. I call it the Michael Jordan effect. There's nothing you can really do about that. But it's gotten a little better here recently. The longer you get away from Jordan, the more football it goes back to. And a lot of kids like this used to just try to play basketball no matter what. Well, he's 6'1", 6'2". He's not playing in the NBA. So making the football decision is a good idea. It's getting better, especially in the trenches. There are a few receivers every year. Carnell Tate, Alubade, they just committed to Missouri. There's a Chicago kid every year now. It's a big-time receiver. It's a really good city for that. Taylor, it's going to start at Michigan. I think you're looking at a situation where this is the new trend. Kids are figuring out 6'1", 6'2" guys not going to play hoops. So that's good. The only question with Chicago is like, which league are you in? Because some of the private leagues and stuff like that, it's not great. It's spread out. So there are kids like it's hard to find film, especially for linemen, where they're going against a guy that's comparable. It's even harder in the South with linemen, but it's even more so in the Midwest. But Chicago football is pretty good. It's not Dallas or Houston, but it's still pretty good.
Well, let's keep in Illinois for a sec. Let's talk about a great name for a 2026 defense line recruit, King Liggins, 6'4", 265 out of Brother Rice. That's a high school. A lot of people know that name. Mid 3-star kid, big strong base. Right when you look at the starting point for him on film, that's the first thing I wrote down. Big, strong, powerful base, good run stuffer, some positional versatility. What did you think of King Liggins?
Depends on the scheme you want to run, but I would assume that he'll be a 4-3 D tackle or a 3-4 power end. Just depends if he's going to one gap or two gap. But I think he's 260, 270 right now. He could end up even being a nose guard, and he's got a frame on him. So he's got a few of the offers, but I think some schools want to see more production early this season. And if with his frame, if he shows something on film, you'll see a bunch of offers early this fall, September, October. Can't teach the size. So he's 6'3", 260, 270, something like that. So I just don't think he's technically as far along as some schools would like. The Texas, Georgia, Michigan offers, but those could be coming because there's just so many guys that you can get at that size. There's not enough. So I'm curious to see what he does. It would be smart for Wisconsin to go all in now so they can say, remember, we were here first, because the cachet is not the same Wisconsin to Texas or whatever. So that's what they've done with some of these other kids, and their D-line recruiting has exponentially improved. Obviously, that might be their shtick.
Well, it's important to note, too, and I know we mentioned this with Jarin Mock, but with these kids as well, you're looking at sophomore film of a defensive lineman. He's 16, 15, 16.
100%. Yeah.
How much harder is that for you? Now you're evaluating 2026 defensive linemen, offensive linemen.
Except for the elite kids, like the gap is massive. The kids that pick it up that early are 20 kids in the class, especially linemen. There's about 5 to 8. It's not many. Receiver you are what you are probably by your sophomore. You might get a little bigger, maybe a little fat. There's not as much contact there. It's about God-given ability, same corner. But in the box, the closer you are to the snap of the football, the longer it takes, because it's more about weight room and your body filling out. So those are very, very difficult.
We'll wrap it there. As always, great stuff with Brian Smith. I do want to leave you with one note. You and I talked we probably did 3 shows on Xavier Lucas last year in the 24 cycle, the kid out of American Heritage, the cornerback, late offer from Miami, Florida. The early reports are, how did they let him get out of Florida, the Florida schools? There's a big-time get, and the hype seems real with him.
He'll probably play this year. I'm not surprised.
You were all over that. He's impressed and turned heads, I'll say that, which that's what we talked about. You get a 6'2" kid who runs a 4.35, 4.4. That plays.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
He is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. Brian, thank you so much as always for tuning in. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Packers, Bucks, or Brewers. Get all your Locked On content right here on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.